It's really important to understand female sexuality so that we can engage with ourselves and our relationships more beautifully and richly. So thank you for being back as our guest.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be with you, Shannan.
Yes, always a privilege. Thank you. Okay, so you had shared that there was a young lady that had told her mom a very frightening secret. And what was it?
Well, she came downstairs and said, Mom, I have a confession. I read Nancy's book from cover to cover. Of course, it's not long. It's a short little book.
It's a great book.
It's a short little book. It's a quick read. And so her mom was kind of cool enough to say, well.
And how old was the daughter?
15.
Okay.
She said, well, what'd you think? And the daughter said, well, Mom, you know, I've been raised in the church. Her daddy's a pastor my whole life. And I always thought that women got the short end of the stick.
I think a lot of women can resonate.
From God.
Mm-hmm.
And after reading this book, I am actually glad that God made me a woman.
That is the greatest compliment.
I know. And I thought, I wonder how many of our sexual problems could be resolved.
Yeah.
If we humans, not just females, but males and females could feel good about our sexuality.
Yes.
And just recognize that God wired us as sexual creatures. There's a divine purpose to it. I mean, if we weren't sexual, we wouldn't be attracted to each other. We wouldn't have attachments. We wouldn't make babies. We wouldn't get married. We wouldn't date. We wouldn't do so many of the things. And so thank goodness we are sexual, and it's beautiful and it's good.
I love it.
Yeah. So
just redefining that. Many people come from, let's start with the purity side. So if they come from a purity culture and that's just a term, right? You might just have a background where your family didn't talk about sex or it was kind of taboo, whatever your culture around that. What do you recommend for people that didn't grow up knowing how to talk about sexuality?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, educate yourself because education can do a lot to help shift your mind and to actually rewire your brain. And then, start being curious with yourself.
Yeah.
Like celebrate that you are a sexual creature and get curious about that.
Yeah.
And realize that it's good. It's really good.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even just saying internal statements, our self-talk is so huge.
Yes.
We just, in restoring self-cohesion, we really engage, like those are literal parts of your soul you're having a conversation with. So that's why sometimes people have a euphoric season in sexuality because the part of them leading is more of an adult. They haven't been triggered in this relationship yet. And so that's the self state that is leading. And then we might go through something where it's like that person's facial expression, or you not sure what their text is, or why did they come home late? And whether something is or is not happening, that could trigger a fear, a mistrust, an insecurity. And so you're literally like a rotation of a diamond, a different part of your soul might be leading. And so now you're engaging from a you that feels more shut down and icky about sexuality, or it just feels like you're weird and I don't want to do that, or I don't have time, I'm exhausted. There's a million different reasons. And one of the biggest is allowing resentment to grow.
That is so true.
Can you talk to us about that?
Well, I wonder if we allow resentments to grow because we're actually trying to avoid attachment.
I think she's right. Yes.
Yes. And so we come up with all these reasons why I don't like you.
Yes.
You're not doing something right. Why I should resent you. Why I should push against you.
Yeah.
And I think those can all be reasons as to why we don't want to attach with somebody. Or attachment can feel really scary. So, I always love looking at attachment with people. Like, how did that go for you?
Yeah.
Because that's going to tell us a lot about how it's going now for you.
Yes.
So if you're more avoidant, you learned in your family, like, I'm on my own. I've got to figure it out by myself. Attachments aren't great. I think I'll stay away from them.
Yeah.
That's kind of then what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And so a great way to push somebody away is like, I resent you. You do everything wrong.
Yes.
And there's something wrong with you. And I just don't like you.
Yeah.
When maybe it's, I think any of our traumas, whether big or small, are a disconnection from ourselves.
Yeah.
So the more we can begin to connect with ourselves and get curious about, hey, instead of focused on what's wrong with him or her, what if I focused on, hey, what's going on inside of me?
Yeah.
Why am I wanting to push away from this person? Why am I filled with so much resentment? Although I don't love why questions, I prefer what questions.
Sure.
Why can feel like a judgment.
Yeah.
Like, why am I acting this way? I'm like, that's never a great question. That's a judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try a little softer
Mm-hmm.
and just like, hey, I wonder what this is about for me.
Yeah.
I wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get curious.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can even write letters to different parts of your soul. And so the me that's okay with sexuality can write a letter and say, hey, me that's struggling. And I think you talked about it a little bit more at that verbal level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you can do it verbal, you can do it talking to a therapist, you can do it journaling or writing of some sort, but just kind of writing to the you that struggles and says, maybe I am avoidant. Maybe I didn't have language for that. But there is a convenient way to blame shift, to deny, because maybe I feel shame or fear or out of control. I don't trust my own desire or the ability to just fully be in the moment, be in my own body. Mm-hmm. And so without doing the internal work, it really just becomes mechanical. And a lot of women shut down when it's just mechanical.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be fascinating if when a woman is being sexual but feeling herself shutting down, if she's just like, I wonder what part of me is shutting down.
Yes.
I wonder what part of me doesn't feel safe right now.
Yeah.
I wonder if I was kind to that part, if I could unburden that part, like say something like, hey, I get why sex feels scary for you. Yeah. Something scary did happen.
Yeah.
And now I want to bring you along. Now, I want to unburden you from the shameful things that maybe you've been carrying, which weren't yours.
Right.
I think so much of healing from trauma is getting out what somebody else did to us.
Yes.
And being able to look at how has this internally affected me.
Yeah, I love that.
Where I think if we see trauma as always something that happened to me, then we don't see really a way out of it.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not negating that something happened. I'm just saying it's a different perspective to start looking at how did this actually impact my insides of me?
Yeah.
And how can I be loving and graceful and kind towards those parts of me that really were hurt?
Yeah.
That really were wounded.
Yeah.
That really were traumatized. And then unburden that part and bring it along.
Yeah.
With a lot of compassion.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that women biblically are the crowning creation.
They are.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell us some of the things of why it's amazing
Yes.
to be a female sexual person.
I would love to talk about that.
Okay.
It is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like, we're just a 2.0 version. Like God made a man and then, wow, he really made a woman. Like science now can do PET scans. And so we have a much better understanding of female sexuality than we did like even probably 10, 20 years ago. Right. So females actually have 8,000 nerve endings in their clitoris versus a penis only has 4.
Whoa.
Yeah, we're double.
4 or 4,000?
4,000. 4,000.
The audience.
Sorry. Thank you. 4,000. So females, their clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings.
Yeah.
The male penis has 4,000 nerve endings.
Wow.
And really the clitoris and the penis are mirror images of each other. They're just organized differently. Females have as much erectile tissue as a male does. Yeah. It's just internal. And so we can't see it. We don't know it. That's why females typically don't know their bodies because men, I mean, think about it. I have 4 little boys. They're adult men. But like every time they go to the bathroom, they are touching and holding and examining their penis.
Yes.
Where females, and research shows that like if a little baby girl touches herself, which is completely normal.
Yes. Normal.
More likely than not, her mommy will slap her hand and say something like, that's dirty, don't touch it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So think of how many of us females, most trauma is pre-verbal, right?
Yeah.
So, so we can grow up feeling like, oh, I guess my private parts are dirty.
Oh.
They're bad. They're icky.
Yeah.
And so, we can have all these ideas that aren't true, but we were trained to believe that they were true. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So if you're a female and you're hearing this, I want you to hear, 1, we love the men in the world.
Yes.
You're not a less than, but I want males and females to be very excited and lean in, because if you're a man who wants to please a woman,
Yes.
she's not actually broken, but she's like a Maserati, really fantastic
Yeah.
car that you have to do a little user manual and figure out how to steward that, which includes, in our last episode, you said the 21 minutes
Yes.
of foreplay.
Yes.
And then I know the expression that foreplay starts in the kitchen. You know, like there's a 24-hour lead up and even legitimate resentments of feeling, you know, like things aren't getting processed. So it's so important for a female to know that about herself, how much emotionally she needs things to be processed and worked through to get out of her head. And for a man to know you listening to your wife's emotions is not just dead air. That's actually foreplay.
It is.
She is more likely to open up emotionally,
That's
which
true.
then gets to her other parts of self.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think vice versa.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can treat men like they're sexual machines
Mm-hmm.
instead of realizing how really tender they are inside.
Yeah.
And that sex can have some really deep meaning for him. And that when like a husband is being turned away or turned down regularly,
The headache.
Yeah, it can go deep into his soul.
Feeling rejected.
Yeah, it can be as painful for him when we don't want to engage with him sexually as it is for a woman if he never wanted to talk to her.
Yeah.
Those are very kind of mirror images of each other.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think all that goes both ways, right? Like we want to be treated, we all need to be treated like we matter and we're worthy of that kind of tenderness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So
I love it. So females are wired for sexuality.
Well, I think the reason that's important is because I think God was speaking through his creation. Yeah. Right. And he says so very much if we would pay attention. So unfortunately, you know, in the purity movement, it was kind of like, you know, you get married and you need to service your man. I know it makes us cringe, doesn't it? I cringe. And God is saying, no. The female clitoris has no other purpose, no utilitarian purpose, which a penis does, right? But the clitoris has no other utilitarian purposes except for female sexual pleasure. Wow. So God is saying a lot.
That's redefining a lot if you come from a background.
That's where God is like, no. This is not a woman's chore and a man's pleasure. Sure. This is for your pleasure. And I think women need that message to be rewired because so many times I'm like, how good would sex be for you right now? Right? Like even if sometimes women can like, we have to have all the ducks in a row, all the stars have to align, all the planets. And, you know, sometimes I've got this baker's shelf in off my kitchen. And sometimes when I'm annoyed with my husband, I'm like, you know what? Sex would be really good for us. I'm just going to put my annoyance up there on that shelf. I can get them if they're still there when I come out. That's right. Right. Go have sex. And then I come out and I'm like, you know, he's really not so bad. Yeah. Because, you know, when you have sex, you're releasing all these feel good hormones and it soothes over the challenges of being married, being in a relationship. Yeah. You know,
putting money back in that bank account.
Exactly.
It's getting a little threadbare. Yeah. So on one side, we have the hyper purity, shame. And then the other side, we have hypersexuality where women wear vaginas on their head and it's, I do anything I want, whenever I want. And it's almost like an objectification of sex by women.
It is. Isn't it interesting?
What a polarizing, and how do we find the middle? Because what do you think might be the damage of coming over here where everything is hypersexual and independent and I don't need a man and I'm just going to hook up, and the whole hookup culture and orgies and all of these things that really take away from attachment?
I think what happens is whatever we repress, we express in outrageous ways.
Yeah, it's good.
So I would just be curious if I had a friend who was really acting out sexually or acting in some sexually outrageous ways. Like, hey, what happened? Yeah. Like, tell me what happened. Yeah. You know? Like I believe the author of the Vagina Diaries, am I saying that right? She wrote that years ago, and she had been raped by her father all through her childhood.
Oh man.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, so we can have these horrible things happen that are so extreme that I think it's almost normal then to act out in some extreme way because we're trying to find a voice for what happened.
Exactly.
And so
Yes.
the more outrageous the voice, the more I wonder what happened.
Yeah.
That's right. And health is found when we can learn how to use our voice and talk about what happened.
Yeah.
It doesn't heal us to act it out. Right.
And by acting out, that could be just the hookup culture or adding violence to a relationship, this BDSM culture, or adding different people or different things into the bedroom. All of that may feel erogenous, but is it actually good for your soul would be the question.
Well, all addictions are an almost. It almost soothes the pain, but not quite.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to look at, all of us have different ways of soothing, right?
Yeah.
And then to realize, but it's an almost. So what would really bring healing to this wound?
Yeah.
Is it another man? Is it a new hookup? Is it a new toy? Is it a new whatever? No, that's fine. Whatever. The thing is, will that really heal the soul?
Right.
And that's what we really want,
right?
For ourselves, for all humans,
Yes.
is a deep healing of the wounds. And when we just keep acting them out, actually what we typically do, we're just adding to the wound.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're not bringing any healing to it. It can feel for a moment like we are, but then we need more and more and more of whatever it is we're doing to try to soothe the wound. And I'm like, what if we all just called a timeout? I'm like, hey, what if I actually turned and looked at where I got wounded?
I love that.
Yeah.
Because so many couples start with really great sex.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, it's kind of getting boring or routine or stale. And so then they just add something.
Yeah.
And so it seems gradual and it seems fine and no big deal. But the reason that matters is usually you're actually masking over a lack of emotional connection and attachment.
Yeah.
You're probably not doing the soul work of relationship, whether individually or as a couple, and having those conversations to feel truly connected and have love. So her first book about love and sex, in that order, it really does increase that emotional connection that then creates vibrant whole self sexuality versus a culture right now that it's just a physical act and it's been reduced to just a couple seconds of, dopamine and reward pleasure pathway getting activated. But by adding the porn, and then adding a little bit of abuse, and then adding a little bit of different kinds of things and people and swingers and all these things. It's not a judgment statement to say, hey, be careful. It's actually a heart awareness.
Yeah, it really is.
To say we're really made to bond, for the two to become one. So while things may seem innocent and innocuous, and it's like, oh, it's just a quirky thing that we do to keep it fresh, be careful, because is that actually a sedative to kind of numb places of pain where you don't know how to actually connect anymore relationally, and you need to do a marriage refresh and a weekend away and a weekend to remember retreat or XO conference or something, so that you're actually bonding, and then sex itself is delightful without having to add all the other things.
Well, and I know the other night my husband and I just didn't turn on the TV. We just sat on the couch and talked for an hour or two. And then lovemaking was just such an easy follow-up to that.
I love that.
Yeah, because we're just taking time to connect with each other.
Wow.
And you just have to be so purposeful in the day and age we live in.
Yes.
It does not happen automatically. As a matter of fact, I think true lovemaking is a premeditated experience.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, how can we actually connect with each other? Oh, what's going on in your world? Let me share with you what's going on in my world. I don't need you to fix anything. Could you just sit and listen? Could we just be together? Tell me about what's going on in here in your heart. Right. And just spending that time to connect, because then you have more than recreational sex. And recreational sex isn't bad.
Nope.
It's great. It works. It's lovely. But when you have soulish sex, it's so much deeper.
Yeah.
And, Corinthians talks about sex was meant to be more than skin on skin. It's just skin on skin. It says it leaves us empty.
And I think that's why people keep pushing the boundaries
I think
and
so
introducing
too.
new things.
Yeah, they're
It's
like, well,
empty.
maybe if we had a third person, it would be really spicy. And it probably will the first few times because it's novelty.
Yeah.
Our brains love novelty. We get bigger dopamine hits and all the chemicals we get.
Yeah.
We release all kinds of things
Yes.
when there's something new. But man, you got to keep amping up that novelty to get the same hit.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it's so much better when we can pause and really look at like, what is truly going on with me? And like, if sex is boring, a great question to ask yourself is, where am I bored?
Ooh, that's good.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead of, you're so boring, honey. It's like, no, where am I bored? What am I ignoring in my own soul?
Yeah. And I think even areas where we're in chronic burnout and we're not being creative or exploring, or awe and wonder has been lost because you've got the baby on the hip and you're vacuuming and you're doing chores and multitasking. And maybe you're a man and you're working all the time, or a woman and you're working all the time. And so burnout and then expecting sex to happen like that. I think that's why I wanted males and females to listen, because it's more realistic to know, hey, if you're not putting in that time ahead, foreplay happening for 24 hours beforehand and preparing and emotionally connecting and slowing down so that you can enjoy, and the realistic expectation that by talking through the emotions and having the hard conversations or just clearing the air and then talking about desire and what you prefer with each other.
I love it when we can own our want, which is how I describe desire. Yeah. It's owning the want.
That's so good.
And women just have permission, like, it's okay for you to own your sexual want. Yeah. And then find ways to invite that and encourage that or initiate that. Yeah. Right. To initiate sex. That can be a lot of fun for a woman. Empowering. Yes.
Right? And so many men would like to be pursued by their wife.
Absolutely. Well, you read the Song of Solomon. She's a pursuer. Right off the bat, she says, kiss me deeply on my mouth. She doesn't want a peck. She wants a real kiss. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I love that. She's a pursuer. And we've gotten some of these purity culture again, that we are these fragile creatures. And, the problem when we fragilize ourselves or others, we stop having honest conversations. We stop saying things like, hey, I don't love that. Can we try this? Or, hey, we used to do this and it was fabulous. And we haven't done that for a while. And so I'd love if we could do that again. Yeah. But we think that our partner's too fragile to hear it, or we're too fragile to say it. Yeah. And then all these opportunities, we wonder what's wrong. Yeah. Like a lot of people in my field will say, well, women just don't like the sex they're being offered. I personally don't like that statement because I think it makes women sound like we're victims. And I don't like to encourage that. Yeah. I like to encourage, like, hey, we all have a voice. We may have to learn how to use it. Yes. Right. And we may have to practice. Sure. And you may not want to make your first practice round about sex, but
high stakes.
Right. Right. And when you do talk about sex, like, it's probably better, like, go to Starbucks where you're not going to end up blowing up with each other and screaming at each other. And if you can't have those conversations, find a really good, healthy, informed person to sit down with and talk it through with. Yeah.
And there's marriage coaches, there's sex therapists, there's couples counseling, individual therapy. There's so many resources. We really don't have an excuse to not lean in. It's out there at all kinds of different ways. There's online groups. Yeah. Make sure it has values that align with yours, because I have seen people go in a direction that one of those ditches. Yeah. So be careful that it's healthy and in moderation. And then let's talk last about female sexuality if they're single.
Yeah. Well, we are wired and created as sexual creatures. So whether you're single or married, you're equally sexual. I think some people are more sexual than other people, but just by kind of their wiring. Sure. But that has nothing to do with being married or single. So I always encourage people, if you're single, like, don't repress your sexual feelings, acknowledge them. Yeah. Right. Like, it's so healthy to go, oh, feeling kind of aroused right now. And it's like, oh, good. Everything's working. Yeah. And when we acknowledge it, a lot of times when we just acknowledge something, then we can let go and move on. And like, oh yeah, I was going to go play tennis with somebody, right? And I think a lot of times we can put everything in the sexual basket.
Right.
And a lot of times what we need is just healthy, connecting, affectionate relationships.
Exactly.
And we all need that.
Yes.
And no spouse can give you all of that.
Right.
You still need friends, you need connections, you need to do pleasurable, fun things, instead of making everything about sex. And don't ignore that you are a sexual creature or just think, oh, I'll just stuff all those feelings down. I'm like, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
Like, I love it when my husband and I are out. Sometimes I go, oh, did you see her? Isn't she gorgeous? Like about another woman.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I like for us both to be able to appreciate beauty. It doesn't mean we're sexualizing her or him. It's just like, there can be an appreciation of beauty of what God has made without sexualizing it.
And then he doesn't feel ashamed because he just saw a beautiful woman.
Exactly.
Because now it's in relationship with you.
Totally. I'm like, honey, you should look at her. She's gorgeous.
And not that they're inviting her either into the relationship.
None of that.
None of that.
None of that. None of that. It's just, I think that when we're like, oh, I can't look. Or, oh,
that reaction. Yeah.
Oh, it's so rigid.
Right.
And, and it's so repressive and it's so almost like grade schoolish, where when we become adults, it's like, no, I can control my own body.
Yeah.
Every woman can, every man can.
Yeah.
And women aren't responsible for monitoring and policing male sexuality. That's why I struggle with some of the messages, like every man's battle. And I'm like, no, I don't think it's healthy to say to men, you're going to struggle with porn your entire life. I know a lot of men that they may occasionally, but no. Is it an entire life struggle? No.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And usually because they've learned how to get into community, get connected, become more wholehearted, get their traumas healed up.
Yeah.
So then, porn isn't the focus.
Exactly.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
And if you're single, a great thing to do is just say, I welcome the sexual part of me.
Yeah.
And everything you bring in the conscious committee of parts of self, now it's no longer an impulse that's an unconscious drive because you brought it into the committee. And so now you can say, hey, Jesus, I invite you to come fill and satisfy my sexual needs. If you're not in a committed, beautiful, healthy relationship, then you're going to have sexual needs. Also, if you have a partner who is disabled or distant, maybe they're in another country and they're working or they're deployed or something, there's just seasons where you may not be able to have sexuality in the way that you would like. So saying, hey, I love sexual part of me, and then picturing a literal part of your soul coming forward and saying, Jesus, I invite you to just come love, honor, redeem, restore, and fill this part of me. And back to your point earlier of we're relational creatures.
Yes.
So whether it's physical sex or actually our greatest need is to belong and attach. Right? We started as one with the umbilical cord coming out of the womb. We were literally inside of somebody else. And then they had to cut the umbilical cord. And kids literally have to learn that we're separate from mom because we're so made for attachment. Yeah. So if you're single, I recommend getting regular massages that are not happy ending. I've heard of those, but just a normal, healthy, appropriate massage. Having regular friend time that you can connect heart to heart, to be able to talk with friends and share and cry and do the real stuff of intimacy and connection. And just because that's not an intimate sexual partner, it doesn't mean it's any less. It's just getting that need met while still trusting God to fulfill whatever your body at an unconscious sexual, social, physical way it needs. He can do that. I know that sounds really weird and there's nothing quirky about that. It's just the belief that in his presence is fullness of joy. And the more you bring things into relationship with him and with community and still getting healthy touch, that's why massage and different things are really helpful, as long as there's no happy ending, and letting friends hug you. And if that's a problem, if you have a kind of a reaction against, then be aware that may be a trauma response.
Totally.
big trauma or small trauma. So this is our just encouragement to you as a female to enjoy your sexuality, whether married or single, and for men to know a little bit more about female sexuality so you can enjoy with your significant other all the pleasure that God designed sexuality to have. Not falling in the ditch of rigid and just perfunctory, but also not in this like really weird, hypersexual, very toxic emotional state that our culture's in, but the sweet spot that there is a pleasure, a banquet set before you, and you get to discover a mystery together, and it unfolds beautifully. So a great resource that Nancy Houston wrote, Then God Made a Woman, Unwrapping Female Sexuality, and also Love and Sex. So be sure to check those out, and we'll have links and all the good things. And of course, we're going to have her back. And thank you for everyone who wrote in questions, comments, things that you were wanting to hear from, and continue to do that. And we will tailor episodes for you. Thanks, guys. Bye.